Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Liberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 238 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Liberman, and today I am excited to talk with you about Q4. First of all, how did we get here? It's crazy that we're already in October as of the time this episode goes live, and we're rounding out the end of the year. So I want to talk with you about the formula to land consulting clients in Q4, because it can look a little bit different than the other quarters. And I want to make sure that you're taking a minute to step back, think about your approach to Q4, adjust your approach so that you're setting yourself up for success and the ability to finish this year strong. And also to set yourself up for an even stronger 2026 or whatever year you're listening to this in. Okay, so with that, let's talk about the agenda for today's episode. We're going to start off with just talking about what Q4 might sound like for you. It sounds like this for so many consultants. So let's see if you can relate to this to set the context. And then we'll dive into the paths that you can leverage to land work in Q4. And I specifically describe it that way because we want to be thinking about this formula essentially to land work in Q4. And some of it will be obvious, I think, just a refresher, let's say, and some of it you might not have considered. And it's the piece that you haven't yet considered, plus that refresher that is hopefully going to give you a boost as we move into Q4 and you're building out your plans and focus areas. All right. So that's what we're going to talk about. First, just set a little bit of context, then talk about the paths to land work in Q4 and what that looks like, and then wrap it up with the ways to put this episode into action. Okay, first of all, does this sound familiar? We're hitting Q4 and you're either in one of two buckets. For a lot of consultants, you might be in this one, which is feeling worried. You haven't hit your revenue goals, or you haven't been keeping up with the amount of revenue you want to be generating. And now as we enter Q4, you feel it's too late for this year and the window is closing. And so you start to panic because you're worried about your ability to generate the revenue you need to generate. And what does that really mean for your future? It's a dark place to be in, but so many of us are there. It's very common not to worry. We have a plan for Q4, so stay tuned. But just ask yourself, are you in that bucket? Are you the type of consultant right now where you're at with respect to this year who's in that state of worry and panic that you haven't hit the numbers and starting to question what you're going to do next year? Is it going to get better or is it going to get, worse? We don't want that for you. So that's why we're here with this episode. The other position you might be in is that you're happy with the results that you've created this year. You hit your revenue numbers or came really close to them. Maybe you even exceeded them. And so there's some temptation to take your foot off the gas because you've already got line of sight into revenue. Maybe you haven't yet collected the cash, but you know that it's going to come. And so there's naturally temptation to take your foot off the gas. Maybe you're fully utilized and you don't have any capacity to take on new client work. But it's so important not to take your foot off the gas and succumb to that temptation. And so whether you're in that first category of worry and disappointment that you haven't hit your numbers, or in the bucket of the category of a business owner who has hit their results and are noticing that you might have some temptation to take your foot off the gas, this episode is for you. This episode is for you so that you can put in place a very purposeful, very fit for the time of year and set yourself up for success with the approach that I'm going to share with you. Because it is a fallacy that consulting clients aren't buying this time of year. I hear that so very often. You might be saying that to yourself. And whether that means all of Q4 or the last, few weeks of the year, that idea that this isn't the time of year that clients are buying is not true. Does work slow down, in the last 2 weeks of December? Definitely. I'm not going to argue with you about that. But work is still being sold, even in the last 2 weeks of the year, even if it's not as common. But work is still being sold in Q4. And so you want a piece of that pie. Don't buy into that thought process. You might be telling yourself that things are slowing down already. And, by Thanksgiving in the US, basically the window has closed. Don't buy into that. You're not setting yourself up for success. And there are other consultants who are not buying into that are grabbing their piece of the pie. We want you to have yours too. So now that I've set up this picture for you and you can decide, and think about where you're at in those categories that I described, now let's talk about how you can make the most of Q4. So, first, let's just talk about what to sell in Q4. Now, listen, none of this is revolutionary. What I'm about to tell you, I'm sure you've thought of in the past, or, it all seems very logical. So, just to set the stage for that. But at the same time, so often I find that we need to hear the obvious. I know I do. I was working with my coach a couple of weeks ago, and honestly, I can't remember what the topic was now that I'm saying it, but he said something to me. It was the most obvious thing, but it hadn't even dawned on me, Sometimes we need a reminder of the obvious. But the point is that it's so important to remember, not only, think about those strategic things and the new way of looking at things like we talk about so often on the podcast. And sometimes it's important just to remind yourself of the obvious. So, with that in mind, let's talk about the obvious. What to sell in Q4. First of all, think about what you want to sell in Q4 and what makes the most sense. Most likely, think about for your business and also for your clients. These are things like short term engagements, kind of quick hit. How do we get a quick infusion of or a quick result type of an engagement that a client, maybe a client of yours or a potential client is at the place where they're really close to hitting their own goals, as a business unit owner, very close to hitting their own goals and need kind of that last push to get them across the finish line. They need you to help them do that. Maybe it's what you could call a budget flush, where it's an organization where they need to use up budget that they haven't yet used. That happens obviously in the government. It also happens in corporate as well. I was talking with a corporate client today who's in the Fortune, 50, and they were talking about we've got to use up our budgets. This is not just a government thing. Being timely, creating offers, creating solutions, creating approaches from a consulting perspective that is timely, such as planning, thinking about, strategy planning for next year and helping clients to not feel like they're flat footed when January comes. Upsells to existing clients. What kinds of offers could you make to existing clients? To give them first crack at your capacity for Q1, their first crack at some of your capacity for 2026. Help them to see that you're not just there whenever they need you, that they need to be intentionally thinking about how they're going to leverage you and your services and your expertise. And so having those types of conversations with them can help them to see you differently and also help you to sell additional work to those existing clients. And then also think about what type of work would be easy to deliver. What type of work would be easy for you to deliver this time of year, especially like workshops or strategy sessions or planning sessions or facilitation, like those types of things that are maybe a day type of an engagement or a couple day type of engagement versus something that you're signing up for that's going to take you the next 6 months. Create some nimble ways of selling the work that you do that makes it easier for your buyer to say yes because it's a shorter duration. It might even go onto their P card. their procurement card. It might, be something that they can leverage to use up part of their budget and really set them up for success in some way, whether it's pushing forward toward a goal that they have for this year or setting them up for success for next year. To really be thinking about what types of things you want to be selling in Q4 that fit this time of year. So now that we have that thought process in motion, now let's talk about drilling that down into a plan. So, what we want to do, just like we always do, is think about what is the goal that we want to set for Q4. The last thing you want to do, which so many consultants do, is just kind of wing it or hope for the best or just let the day to day consume them and not take a step back and say, okay, what is my true goal for Q4? And let me put that down on a piece of paper or a planner if you need one. I created one. It's got so much of this type of goal setting in the beginning of it. Set your goal for Q4. Even if you have no pipeline, even if you feel like it's almost impossible to land a client, do it anyway. Don't give up before you even started. Then I also recommend that you set your specific schedule. Again, don't wing it. When is your time off? Block it off. If you're off starting the 17th of December to the 5th of January, block off the time and make an agreement with yourself that you're not going to work in that time period or that you're going to do these 2 or 3 things during that time period. Like be very clear with yourself so that you don't end up eroding and compromising that time off, which will help to rejuvenate you. Decide on your last day of work. Decide on your return to work. Get clear on your available capacity between now and then. So you know exactly what it is that you have available, quote unquote, what inventory you have available to sell, which is your availability to do work with clients. That's another, data point for you to decide what it is you're going to sell. Is it some kind of facilitation or workshops or planning sessions or strategy sessions like we were talking about a minute ago? And then finally, ask yourself, what are you committing to do between now and your last day of work for this year? And I like to bucket this into 2 groups, your process goals and your results. What are you committing to between now and the last day of work in Q4? Thinking about it from the perspective of process goals, this would be things like your lead generation activity. Your process goals are things like I'm going to talk with 5 people a week in my warm network to get really good at having conversations and turning them into opportunities or uncovering opportunities through those conversations. That would be a process goal, that kind of quantity. I'm going to do these activities or an activity based goal. Then we have a result goal. It might be, again, what are you committing to between now and your last day of work in Q4? For example, if you're thinking about results, what is your pipeline value? What do you want the pipeline value to look like between now and that last day of work? How many clients do you want to have landed? How much revenue do you want to have contracted? How much cash do you want to have collected? Those would be examples of results that you want to write down and commit to them between now and the last day of work that you've designated. So we've got this first step is deciding what you're going to offer and to what type of client you're going to offer it. What are you going to focus on? We're going to make a plan to make that happen. And then we're going to make sure that you've got the right fuel to bring those results to life. And by fuel, I mean your mindset. By fuel, I mean the way you're thinking. If you go through the first 2 steps and you fuel it with a thought process, which is, well, this isn't going to work, but I'll do it anyway, or it's highly unlikely I'll find a client. It's highly unlikely anyone's buying my type of consulting services right now. Of course, you've already failed before you even started. And so making sure that this approach for Q4 is fueled by the most effective mindset that you can generate. And when it isn't effective, you have a practice to redirect it so it is a mindset that's aligned to the goals that you're trying to accomplish. An aligned mindset. So we've got, what are you selling? We've got, what is your plan to sell that? And we've got the fuel for you to accomplish that plan and those goals. And this mindset, this aligned mindset, is you thinking about, number one, the possibility of you reaching your goals. It's not enough to just write the goal down. It's not enough to just decide, well, this is the activity I'm going to do to reach the goal. It's not enough to say, well, I want my pipeline to have this certain value. It's not enough. What is enough is aligning your mindset and realigning your mindset when you go off the rails to align to those goals, to redirect from, I don't think this will work, but I'll do it anyway, for example, to, it's possible that this is the best time for my ideal clients to engage me. I can generate leads anytime, even in Q4. Leads can close quickly. Understanding what your belief system is, what your mindset is that does not align to your Q4 goals, and redirecting it to something that is aligned to the goals that you have and is also something that you can wrap your head around, that you can believe, that doesn't feel like a fantasy. This is not positive thinking. This is not about putting lipstick on a pig. This is about you creating a mindset intentionally that aligns to the goals that you have so that you set yourself up for success. And I gave you some examples of that. I'll say a few more just to really hammer this point home. But the aligned mindset does not sound like, I hope this will work. It does not sound like, Melissa told me to make a Q4 plan and I'm doing it, but I don't think it's going to result in anything. It does not sound like, clients don't buy this time of year. It does not sound like, well, my industry, others could be different. It doesn't sound like any of those justifications or rationalizations or ways for you to justify the status quo. What it does sound like, your aligned mindset, is redirected from those thought patterns that shut you down over to thought patterns that open up the possibility, that whatever it is that you set your goal to be is something that you can achieve. Such as, it's possible that this is the best time of year for my ideal clients to engage me. I can generate leads anytime I want. Those leads can close quickly. That is the type of thinking that will help you to get to the place where you've got an aligned mindset that matches back to the plan that you created, that matches back to the type of services that you believe are best align to the type of clients that you want to work with. This is not the time of year. Never is it the time of year, especially right now. This is not the time of year to give up, to say, oh, no one buys in Q4. I'm not close enough to my goals. I'm going to start up again next year. This is not the time of year to give up and say, I crushed this year. I'm going to coast in and really be excited about what I achieved and start afresh the new year. Enjoy the holidays. I'm not telling you to work through the holidays, but what I am telling you is to put a purposeful plan in place, whether that's to land one new client or generate 10K or have a pipeline value of $500,000 when you move into 2026, but not to just give up because it's Q4. And so many of us do. And ultimately, the benefits of taking the approach that we've talked about on today's episode are not only the most obvious, which is that you can still generate revenue in Q4. There is still time to hit your goals in Q4 if you haven't hit them yet. There's still time to exceed the goals that you set without having to overwork to do that. There's still time to achieve those very tangible goals and benefits. There's also time to create momentum as we go into next year so that you don't feel flat-footed, so that you have a pipeline, so that when you do come back from taking much deserved time off, and being able to recharge your batteries, that you don't feel like you're starting from a blank sheet of paper, that you've got amazing leads already in the pipeline. Those are the tangible benefits of this plan we've been talking about, or this approach we've been talking about today. And also, there are intangible benefits of taking the approach that we talked about today. You'll have data points for yourself. If you set the goals that, like we talked about, you create some offers that are specific for Q4, for example, and you run a campaign even against those goals. We'll link to that episode about how to create a campaign to land clients, which is not the traditional type of campaign that you might be thinking about. Like it's not an ad campaign. And you leverage that type of campaign approach, and then you get the data points from it and the lessons learned from it, which are invaluable for you. Even if you don't add anything to your pipeline, that's so much more valuable than just focusing on what's comfortable, like client delivery, and not worrying about your business until Q1 hits, until January hits. And then finally, the other benefit that I don't want you to overlook is the mental side of this. Teaching your brain to keep going despite the odds, teaching your brain to keep going despite all of the arguments it's making to you about why this is not the best time of year to be selling consulting work. Teaching your brain that you're able to make things happen regardless of those external circumstances. That is incredibly valuable. Even if you don't add revenue to the bottom line in Q4, having those data points, having those lessons learned, having those opportunities to build up your mental strength, are even just those alone are a reason to do this. So as you think about Q4, I encourage you to put these 3 steps into place where you figure out what you want to sell in Q4 and what your best guess is as to the services that are most aligned to what your clients are wanting right now and needing right now, and that fit in with your capacity and ability to deliver based on your availability. And then you make a clear plan, your best guess about how you're going to make that happen. And then finally, you're going to fuel it with an aligned mindset to bring it to life and to get the data points that are so valuable as you go all in on this plan that you've made. So as we wrap up today, to put today's episode into action, I just gave you those 3 key steps to landing clients in Q4. And also, if you want to have more structure around this, I would offer you 2 tools that you could consider. The first is my quarterly business planner. You can find it on Amazon. It's a physical product, a physical planner for the quarter. It will help you put this type of action plan into place. And one quick note, I think it's really interesting. I didn't know this, but there are a lot of studies out there that talk about the benefit of writing physically with a pen or a pencil versus typing, because it makes our brain slow down. It takes us longer to write than it does to type. And so it forces our brain to slow down and helps us to become more strategic, for example, in our business. So if you want to get back into writing physically and building out a really solid plan, and then making sure that you're executing it on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, daily basis, that is the planner for you. So you can go find that on Amazon. We'll put the link also in the show notes. And then finally, the Business Brain Journal is a great complement to that business planner because it helps you with the aligned mindset piece of this process that we were talking through today. It gives you 100-day structured journaling where you can work on the 6 key mindsets that make independent consultants most successful. So go grab those on Amazon. But either way, if you don't, I highly encourage you to put this episode into action and those 3 steps I gave you, regardless of what type of tool you use to do so. All right. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melisaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.